Today's deep dive is inspired by the flurry of free agent signings in the NFL and looks at how teams handle offseason negotiations. We'll be joined by Gavin Reynolds, who used to work for the league. But before we take the deep dive, our quick five. One, sports docs and documentaries are everywhere, and there's controversy about how they're changing the art form. Two, the UFL faces a survival test before its second season. Three, Dana White is getting into business with the Saudis. Four, Trump leans into politics for the World Cup. And five, Stephen A. Smith takes a shot at the king. I'm Jason Kander. I'm joined by Ravi Gupta and Adisu Demisi. Welcome back to The Game Within, where we talk about the business and politics of sports and how each shapes what happens on the field.
All right, first up, so news just broke that there's been this long rumored Prince documentary that was going to be on Netflix, directed by Ezra Edelman, who did the OJ docu-series. And there have been all these kinds of things floating out there about like all these revelations. It's going to be riveting. They went deep. They had the family's approval, the estate's approval. And then it just came out that Netflix basically canceled the documentary. It's already been created. So this guy's already like directed, edited, put together this documentary series, but it will never see the light of day because of a dispute with the estate, which is essentially controlled by some lawyer now, where I think they just feel like it would be too embarrassing to Prince. And now Netflix has given the rights to all of this, like, which essentially like there's a vault of Prince footage. The rights to make a new documentary series now vest with the estate, where they can just do a sanitized version of the documentary series that, you know, essentially will tell whatever story they want. And I think this is in line with something we've been talking about, which is the Aaron Rodgers documentary series is an example of this. It's just like, all right, like we're now in the age now where most documentaries we see are a very limited view on whoever the subject is.
Yeah, they are largely like if you stick around for the credits, or if you look closely at the opening credits, you will frequently see that the subject of the documentary is also named as a producer or often an executive producer of the doc. And there's a real controversy as to whether or not this is changing the art form, because, you know, documentaries, they're movies, but they're also journalism, right? There's sort of a cross between the two. And so this is kind of where this has all been heading, right?
But I think what you're saying is correct, that they're kind of a mesh between the two. But you know, everyone's a content creator now in sports, right? That is like one of the major developments of the 21st century, I think, is that athletes have become their own content creators, their own businesses, and content creation is a big part of that business, whether that be social media or a documentary. And so I just think that sports documentaries are becoming more entertainment and less journalism. And I was watching a documentary totally randomly the other day. It was very meta because it was about Game 7 of the 1985 NHL Stanley Cup Finals. It was a documentary called Game 7. Edmonton versus Philadelphia was the game, but to produce that documentary, which was produced in 2023 or something like that, they used footage that they acquired from guys who followed the team and were fully embedded with the team in 1985. And those guys were actually kind of the subject of this documentary. Point is, that documentary was like a glorification of the Oilers of the mid 80s. But the footage that those guys had from being embedded in the, you know, with the team for 2 years, actually, they were there for both, I think, 84 and 85, was incredible. And they were basically part of the team. And I just think that's unfortunately like not the way documentaries are done, or is certainly the exception and not the rule now.
Yeah, I think it's like an autobiography versus biography, right? Mm-hmm. Like I think sometimes these documentary producers are super precious. And this is not a knock on Ezra Edelman, because I think he has a huge gripe. He created the damn thing and they put it in a drawer. That's very different. But I do think that it should be allowed, just like you're allowed to write your own autobiography, and you have to do it really well for people to read it. Because if you're not candid and it's boring, politicians fall into this all the time. Like nobody reads it. Mm-hmm. Versus if the more candid you are, the more you lay bare, like Andre Agassi's perfect example of this, people will read it. Mm-hmm. And it could be done, and it could be better than something that was produced by somebody else. On the flip side, having an objective take on somebody's life has its place, and depending on the sort of footage that's available and who's putting it together and how much time has passed, sometimes it could be a really wonderful thing.
You make a great point, the comparison to books, because we used to always hear the term the authorized biography or the unauthorized biography with regard
Right.
to books. So there's a clip about this from Pablo Torre's show. Let's watch.
This is the thing I just find galling. I mean, I can't get past this of like the short-sightedness of a group of people whose
Ravi, this
interest
is
is their
Ezra
own
Edelman,
bottom line. They're afraid of his humanity. The lawyer runs this
Yeah,
case
Ezra Edelman,
essentially
the
said he
creator
believed that this would
of the
do
documentary.
generational harm to Prince. In essence, that the portrayal of Prince in this film, what people learn about him, would deter younger viewers and fans potentially from loving Prince. They would be turned off. This is, I think, the big issue here. I'm like, this is a gift. A 9-hour treatment about an artist that, like, it was, by the way, fucking brilliant. Everything about who you believe he is in this movie. You get to bathe in his genius.
Yeah.
And yet you also have to confront his humanity, which he, by the way, in some ways was trapped in not being able to expose because he got trapped in his own myth about who he was to the world.
Well, I mean, I've been hearing about it for a while, and I wish I could see it. There's a few other examples here, right, of documentaries like this. You know, so which one of you is more briefed on the Meghan Markle situation and wants to talk about it? If it's
I
neither,
spoke
I'll
to
say.
somebody about it today. I personally have not seen it, but it's that one actually. I put it in there, but it's less a documentary than just her own show. But you know, we talked about the Aaron Rodgers docu-series, which, you know, everything is from his perspective. His family, everything is like, my family is wrong, which they, you know, I think we've talked about it here or elsewhere. Like, he makes a good case against his own family, I have to say, but it's, or like RFK Jr. is a genius. Like, these are just the things that are just unexamined. Like, he just makes all these claims, and you walk away from it. And I have to say, I'm probably one of the least primed people to be sympathetic to Aaron Rodgers. And even I had to do a double take and be like, no, wait a minute. Like, and even the vaccine thing where he said inoculated versus vaccinated or whatever, he presents it in a way that makes it seem like he was like righteous, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it does, there is a danger in these things where you're just straight up spreading falsehoods. You know, we could expect something in the Melania documentary that's coming out on Amazon.
Especially if it's the people don't examine the source, to Jason's point. It's like, if you don't realize the executive producer is the subject, or, you know, if folks are intentionally hiding that, you're trying to pass it off as biography when it's actually autobiography, and that's a problem, right? And so I think part of the responsibility of folks is to be like, no, this is actually the authorized, you know, this is the authorized biography, but like, to get the real story, you need someone like Ezra Edelman or I think in an ideal world, you want someone like Ezra Edelman to tell it. And I honestly think that in the future, those, even though they're becoming more few and far between, are going to actually become the more popular and more successful documentaries, because they're going to be more rare that you actually get the unvarnished version of somebody.
And I think people are going to come to know the difference. But I also think that what it also means is that if you're going to do one of these, like, for lack of a better way of putting it, like auto docs, it, I think, incentivizes you to give the filmmaker more room to work and to tell a more comprehensive and thorough story. Because I think that if you do that, I think that you're going to be rewarded for that by critics and ultimately by audiences. You know, like The Last Dance is a good example of that. I mean, obviously, like, you know, Scottie Pippen doesn't come off great, but there's a lot of ways in which Jordan doesn't come off great, and he's one of the producers. And so clearly, somewhere along the way, though he was part of creating The Last Dance and had some sort of editorial role, I guess, you know, he also clearly made the decision of like, no, you tell the story. Like, he clearly did not put his thumb too firmly on the scales, because there's lots of ways that he don't come off very well. He speaks to it in the documentary. And I think that if you're going to take that approach, the way to do it is to have the confidence to be like, okay, tell the story. I'll tell my part, but tell the other parts, you know?
The best example of this is the Kanye docu-series. I don't know if any of you guys saw it on Netflix, which is, it was filmed by his buddy Cootie, who I think Kanye had to sign off on the use of the footage. And it's Kanye, so it's like not flattering at various points. and if Kanye exercised discretion over what was shown, he used his own Kanye tiger blood discretion. It is a masterpiece, honestly. I'm surprised more people don't talk about it. I guess in part because it coincided with the demise of Kanye, but it's incredible. Like you watched it, Kanye had the foresight to know he was going to be famous and was filming his own life before he became famous.
Oh, wow.
So it's very Kanye. And there's scenes where he's just trying to make it in this world, and he's like a successful producer, and he goes into, I think, a Rockefeller Records office, and he's playing what eventually became his first record for the secretaries, and they're rolling their eyes at him. And there are plenty of scenes like this
That's
where he's
pretty
chasing
amazing.
down Dame Dash. Regardless of what we think about him now, right, where he's obviously totally gone off the deep end, it is an incredible just piece of work where you see this guy who is very talented and very driven and very confident in himself, pushing past every conceivable obstacle in his way. And you're like, okay, this is awesome, and only possible because he commissioned the footage.
Mhm.
Per your point that we started,
Look,
Jason.
sometimes access journalism is the only version of journalism you're going to get, and you're going to have to take that into consideration. Sort of the ultimate example is somebody recommended to me not long ago that I watched this doc called Hollywood Gate, which is actually this I think Egyptian filmmaker spent a year with the Taliban, starting with the fall of Afghanistan and the takeover of the Taliban. And what he does is he basically embeds with the guy who's supposed to be the general in charge of the Air Force. The Taliban's trying to reconstitute their Air Force. And in order to do it, he's very open about the only way for me to do this is to film the things that the Taliban wants me to film, and to not really film the other things. He acknowledges that those things are there, but it's still super illuminating because you watch it and you are aware I'm seeing the version the Taliban is allowing me to see, and yet I'm still, because I know that, I'm seeing a lot of really revealing, really damning things about the Taliban. So there's a huge spectrum here when it comes to this quote unquote access, documentary stuff.
Well, let's go to story number 2, the UFL, which I'm going to need you guys to remind me what the hell it is.
United Football League, I think.
I think it's United. Yeah.
Well, they're facing labor issues here. It looks like the QBs are essentially going on strike. The base salaries here are not great. So they're talking about $55,000 base salary. And it looks like the NFL Players Association is getting involved and sticking up for the UFL players. So, I mean, I don't know.
Okay, so all right, the UFL is, this has been tried several times, right? I mean, there was a version of this that was the XFL, which I think merged. I think that's part of this now because The Rock was involved with the XFL, and now The Rock owns this league. There was a friend of mine, Charlie Ebersol, a few years ago had the AAF. I can't remember what it was, but the American Association Football, whatever it was, and it didn't work because they had like a huge investor that it turned out, turned around on them. But there's been several times where somebody has decided to say, like, okay, look, Americans officially love football, and there's a huge group of sports fans between February and August who are desperate for football. And if we give them some kind of football, they will watch it. And it seems like the UFL has had some success with this. And it also now is officially associated, I believe, with the NFL. Like it is officially affiliated. So there's been a handful of guys who have made it from the UFL to the NFL. Okay, look, we got this graphic here from Philip. You got several teams that have signed a UFL player. It looks like roughly half the teams. So this is basically a labor dispute, right? Of whether or not because this is it's a dangerous game, man. If you're not being compensated.
Yeah, but NFLPA is certainly, I think, generally considered among the weaker unions because it's football. It's an owners' league, right? Not obviously the owners own the league, but they also own everything about the league, right? They own the commissioner, basically. Hook, line, and sinker. And the bottom line is, this is I think the UFL, if it's a minor league, is really just a stepping stone to get to the NFL and real money. As Ravi was saying, the base salary is something like $55,000 a year. It's money, but to put your body on the line, you think about how long the average NFL career is, a couple of years, and you might end up with permanent physical injury. It's nothing. And so good on the NFLPA for sticking up for the players of the UFL, but the UFL players, there's the statement from the NFLPA, but the reality is some of the UFL players, it looks like, aren't interested in solidarity, because really all they want is a showcase to get one of those big contracts from the NFL and live out their dream. And so you have this real tension here. And I think as long as it's such a seller's league or buyer's league, however you want to call it, it's an owner's league, and you have such a scarce resource of actual, roster spots on NFL teams, you're going to have players who just want the shot more than they want the money and the protection. And that's, in some ways, that's why labor unions exist in the first place, collective bargaining for collective. But if you have individuals who don't want it, it's going to be a tough pill for them to swallow.
Well, let's go to story number 3 here, because we're going to come back to NFL labor relations a little bit later in this episode. Let's go back to the Saudi Arabia, where the sports washing continues. The Saudis now announced a joint venture with Dana White's TKO Sports to launch what seems to be some kind of boxing league.
Yeah, well, we got a video here of the announcement, so let's start with that.
What's up, guys? We have just done a deal to start a new boxing league with Turkey, who absolutely loves the sport of boxing.
I am very happy today. I give the flag of boxing to the best man who can handle it. He have a tough job now, but I am sure he will be delivering to the people and the fans the magnificent league and get boxing great again.
The model is proven to deliver the fights that the fans want to see. The best will fight the best, and the fighters will continue to move up the rankings and become world champions. We will continue to make announcements on where you can watch and all the rest of the details on the business as we get closer to the launch. I'll see you soon.
Okay,
Point of clarification: it's not the country of Turkey. The guy's name is Turkey.
Yeah.
Just in case people
Yeah. So he's a Saudi guy, right?
Yes, I think he's from the investment fund, the Saudi
Okay.
investment fund.
So if you have any doubt about why we started this show, about the politicization of sports and the sportsization of politics, all you need is a Saudi investor standing next to Dana White and saying that he's investing this money to make boxing great again. I mean, it's like this is happening all around us, and I just thought that was sort of a perfect little example.
It really was. And let's be honest, boxing, this actually feels like a marriage that can work and should work, right? Like, call me crazy, but it's not like boxing has been the
Clean,
brightest light, cleanest sport that ever was, right? And so, but ultimately, this is, the Saudi money is whether you think it's sports washing, whether you think it's this guy's personal interest in building leagues, whether it be the soccer league or the golf, as we've talked about on this show before, like, money talks, and it's just a matter of time, I think, before this comes for major American sports. We've said it a couple of weeks ago, and I'll say it again. I think whether or not that actually happens is another story. The NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball are American institutions in a way that the WB, whatever, in boxing is not, even the PGA is not. But this one I feel like is going to work. Like, it's, it's only a step away from MMA, which I think is a fun sport, but it's, the corruption in boxing and the, dirtiness of this, I think, kind of can go hand in hand.
Yeah. I mean, your point being that it's not as if we're not like, oh my gosh, they're going to corrupt boxing. Right.
Yeah.
It's interesting having it be, part of moving over to the Dana White umbrella, because if you're let's put the Saudi of it all aside for a moment, but only for a moment, we'll come back to it. If you're an investor and you're trying to invest in something that is boxing and you're like, who am I going to get to make this work? Dana White is probably who you're going to do it with. I mean, I don't know if y'all remember growing up, MMA was just called the tough man competitions. And it was just, and I don't know if it was octagon shaped, but it would come to town and there'd be a big cage in the middle and there'd be a fighter. And then they would say, who wants to come in and fight this dude? And then a dude would fight like 16 times in a night, right? And like bare knuckled. And it was like looked down upon. It was not seen as a sport. And now it is a very mainstream sport. And with, a large audience. My wife and I watch some MMA. We enjoy it. We watch UFC. We're not huge fans, but we do watch sometimes. And so I could see it working. I really could.
Well, there's unification issues in boxing too. It's like I don't
Right.
understand the first thing about what's going on, but it seems like
The disputed champ, the
it
undisputed
seems like
champ.
a total mess, and I'm not sure this is going to clean it up. But
No.
maybe all this money will come in
And
clean it
Dana
up.
White, I disagree with Dana White's politics. I obviously disagree with a lot of the Saudi government's politics, but
all of their politics. Really,
all of their politics.
Start
right?
with
But
I don't know, Wahhabism and 9/11, and then we just work our
let's
way
go
from
with
there.
that. But there's no doubt that Dana White is a good businessman when it comes to combat sports. And so, okay, fine. The problem here, if there is a problem, is the politics of it, right? Which, Jason, you highlighted at the top end of this, and I think is certainly true, is like, what is the purpose of the Saudi PIF investing in this American sport? Or it's not an American sport, it's an international sport, but with this American company. Is it to take over boxing and do what with their money, et cetera, et cetera? But as a business venture in sports, like, I can't imagine anybody better to like build a boxing, a unified boxing league than Dana White, because he's done it for MMA and he's done it extremely well.
Sorry, Jason.
I was going to say, so under the Crown Prince, under Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Arabia has announced plans that will involve more than $1 trillion in investments to complete its Saudi Vision 2030 umbrella project, which envisions turning the country into a leader in business and entertainment. So the thing about this is like, what just is fascinating to me, I get it, golf, now this and other things, is that when I think entertainment, I don't think Saudi Arabia, but money is what, makes the world go round here. So they're like, we got a lot of it. What are we going to invest in? We're going to invest in stuff that is live sports mostly, because that seems to be where international eyes are gravitating toward. But it's also a country where like a lot of movies are banned. There was a big deal a few years ago when AMC was like, we're going to open movie theaters in Saudi Arabia. So it's really confusing to me.
Well, we should come back at some point to the culture around the UFC. If there was a fight this weekend, I think like the Tate brothers were there, and Dana White embraced Andrew Tate and said, "Welcome back to the country." And Zuckerberg was there with his wife, and yada yada yada. But we'll come back to that another day. Story number 4: Trump, and this really is just a circle back. I don't know if there's much to talk about here, but he basically must have listened to our episode last week, because he was asked about how he saw the World Cup playing out, given the current trade situation between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, which are, for people who are listening, are all three kind of jointly handling the World Cup. And he says, I think it's going to make it more exciting. Tension's a good thing. I think it makes it much more exciting.
You're also you're sure. I agree with that as a general statement of fact. Turns out, though, that you're also implicating the lives of hundreds of millions of people with your tension creation, brother. So, yes, it goes back to what I said a couple episodes ago about his taunting of Canada. Like, would have been fun and kind of funny, honestly, and like a good-natured ribbing between opponents. We have it on this show whenever the Bills play the Chiefs, right? But this is more than US playing Canada in soccer or the Bills playing the Chiefs in football. This is tariffs and imperialism and all the things that go along with it. And so this is not the good kind of tension, the good kind of sports hate, as it were. This is like scary stuff that could affect millions of people's, lives.
So Trump's never really been, to my knowledge, a soccer fan, but I think it's pretty reasonable to predict that he will insert himself into this, because there will be a lot of people watching, and that's what he does. So we're like over a year out. Do we have any predictions as to what he's going to do? I mean, obviously he's going to probably make the U.S. team
Well, you saw
spend time
you
with
saw
them.
the task force thing from this week, right? Like Ravi, the White House started a World Cup task force of which the
Oh.
president is the chair.
Oh, well, that explains
so,
that.
So now he's the chair of the World Cup task force, which is
Let
obviously
me
a
look
made-up
who's on
presidential
this
thing.
thing. Did they say who's on it?
I don't think they've appointed it yet. It was like created by executive order, but they definitely said the president is the chair
And
of it, right?
what
So
will
he
the
now has
task force be doing?
promote the World Cup, etc.
Okay.
It gives him I mean, he already had a platform to do it, but now it gives him a fake extra platform to, like you
It's
said, do whatever he
fascinating
wants.
to me when politicians need titles upon their titles.
Yeah,
Like,
you're the president, dude. Come on.
it's like him with the Kennedy Center. He's got to chair that board too. Like, it's like you're kind of the honorary chair of everything that you appoint, man. Like,
Yeah.
Well,
Everything you said, Robbie, the other day, and I think you should expound on this because, like, everything to him is a TV show. Everything to him is about building interest and building intrigue, I guess, as it were. And this is just everything is a pawn in that game. And it turns out that like sports is, as Jason said, like sports is a big part of that for him. MMA is at the top of that list, but now it's going to be soccer and the Eagles. I think we're going to talk about at some point them going to the White House and that whole tension. So everything is about him and building interest and intrigue. And it turns out the collateral damage of all of that is like people's lives and policy and the things that matter and on a day-to-day basis in running the government. So that was my political rant for the day. I'll stop there.
yeah.
let's quickly talk about story number 5 before we bring in a guest here. Our friend Stephen A. Smith signed a $100 million contract with ESPN, and in the same week got in a sideline argument with one LeBron James over Bronny James. And nobody really knows exactly all the words that were exchanged, but I think it's pretty clear. Stephen A. Smith criticized LeBron James, and I think what LeBron James has said was that it was the as a father framing of things that pissed LeBron James off, basically bringing in the fact that LeBron James is a father. Adiso, I know you're in the camp. You've been in the LeBron camp, so let me at least try to defend my boy Stephen A. Smith here a little bit.
Let's let him defend himself.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay, go.
You got a clip of him.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but like,
Oh, this is LeBron talking.
Why do you want to be the face of a league when all the people that that cover our game and talk about our game on a day-to-day basis on everybody? I mean, that responsibility. It's just weird. It's weird energy from the people that I don't know, but Channing, he said it. He said it perfectly. Couldn't have said it no better. But Ant said he don't want it. Obviously I didn't ask for it, but I knew there was a responsibility for me, not only to my family, my friends, my community, and whoever that was going to follow my journey throughout my career. Not only in Ohio when I started there, but all over America and all over the world when I traveled all over the world. So. I've always taken that seriously and understood from the beginning what being a professional was all about.
We can move past this now. So he's talking about this whole face of the league discussion, which is related, but I think the point I wanted to make here on Stephen A. Smith is that the reason why we're talking about Bronny James is because of LeBron James. He basically yanked his son into the league, and his son has the lowest shooting percentage in NBA history. And it's because LeBron James is his father. So it's hard to talk about Bronny James without talking about his father. Like, I don't want to get into family business, but the only reason why sports fans are even familiar with this dynamic is because of LeBron as a father. I don't want to criticize him as a dad. It's hard to talk about one without the other. We don't really talk about I don't really talk about like the ins and outs of G League basketball or the bench of the Lakers, but that certainly is Stephen A. Smith's terrain. So I'm not too mad at him over it.
I guess I'm not sure what the criticism of him as a dad would be, because that sounds like the coolest ass dad move I've ever heard.
See, now I'm going to go into this territory, and
I mean, as a dad, it's pretty cool.
I disagree.
God, like if I were a ball player and I could bring my son on, my son was good enough for me to make the case that he could come out of the team, even if he wasn't playing very well, I'd be like, I did a great job.
I have questions. Like, I don't want to go too far here because I don't know all the information, but it's like, it feels to me like one could make the case that he kind of nudged his son along to play the sport that he plays and pushed him to be in the league before he was ready, which arguably one could say is not good for the son, to put him in a league before he's ready and to kind of push him that's
Who knows? Who knows?
Or you could say that he and his son wanted to make history by playing in the NBA together as the only father-son duo to ever do it. And that's a completely amazing experience that is worth having. And they probably both were interested in it. But either way, what is interesting to me about this is the argument about whether or not LeBron was like invited being the face of the league and that kind of stuff. And I have a hard time getting, and I'm a huge LeBron fan. So, I'll put that on the table. Like, I am pretty in the tank for LeBron James. And I never really understand when people are haters of LeBron, because I'm like, okay, here's a guy who, was raised by a single mom, grew up with really no money. And at the age of 18 is on the cover of Sports Illustrated. At 19 is, the most highly anticipated draft pick in the history of the NBA. And he's somewhat, despite, coming from humble beginnings, he's got the confidence to be like, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and keep wearing number 23. And then he goes through his whole career. It's full of greatness. There's really, what's the biggest LeBron James scandal? It's that he was kind of, it was seen as kind of, I don't know, uncouth or uncool the way he left and went to Miami. But then 5 years later, whatever it was, he turns around and does the coolest ass thing in the world and goes back to Cleveland and wins them a championship. What an amazing dude. Like, I've never really understood the people who want to hate on him at all. I just don't get it.
I sports hate him because I'm a Warriors fan, but I respect the hell out of him. Obviously, I've worked with him and his team before too. But I think I think Bronny is 100% in bounds. He's a player for the Lakers, just like any of the other 449 players in the league. Like, you can talk about him just as easily as you can talk about LeBron. Stephen A can do whatever the heck he wants, and LeBron can do whatever he wants because that's his son. If someone's talking shit about my son, or I perceived it as that, I'd do the same thing. So I honestly think this is like, good on Stephen A. Keep doing it. Good on LeBron. Keep defending him. Good on the rest of us for paying attention, because we're talking about it here for 4 or 5 minutes, and and probably honestly good for the league. Now, I will agree, Ravi. The one thing that's weird is like that one of those spots that Bronny James takes up on the Lakers could, in theory, go to one of the other tens of thousands of basketball players who are probably good enough to play in the NBA. But basketball is also business, and there's no doubt that the Lakers were totally fine using the 55th pick in the draft on LeBron's son and the tickets that it sells and the jerseys that it sells. And Bronny was a social media star when he was in high school, because obviously his name is LeBron James Jr. So this is business. It's all business, and it's all good as far as I'm concerned.
At the end of the day, you do things to keep your star happy. Sometimes those things are like, you buy him a car. Sometimes they get, what the stuff people talk about with Russell Wilson when he was with the Broncos, that he had like an office at the. Okay, so you have a guy who goes up and down, from the NBA to the G League, who's his son and is making history. That's so cool.
Well, we've talked about previously how the NBA needs to push its ratings. And I think what Stephen A. Smith is doing is helping his own ratings, and also inadvertently probably trying to push more drama into the NBA. But I'm against nepotism in all shapes and forms. If this were a widget factory and you're like, you know what? Like, the guy who owns the widget factory, he has a son, and we've got 15 widget line managers, and one of those 15 widget lines is historically awful at making widgets. I would be like, all right, well, let's actually talk about how this widget line manager got here, because my job is to comment on whether the widget lines are effective or not, because that's what they pay me $100 million to do.
Stephen A. Gupta has spoken.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the other side to that, which is how many of these teams are run by people who have them because their mom or dad own the team, right? How much nepotism is there?
I know, but I hate
in ownership. Okay, but it's a thing, and we don't sit around saying how that's wrong and it should stop, and we don't say like, hey, there are other rich people who deserve an opportunity who don't have that last name and deserve an opportunity to be the chairperson of that team. And now we have like finally, one of the players who's, I don't even think arguably, but arguably the greatest to ever play the game is like, I would like to have a little piece of that nepotism for a year or maybe 2 so that I can get a few games in with my son. I mean, like LeBron's been pretty clear a few years ago that like he's going to hang around so that he gets a chance to play with his son. So I think it's fine. Like, I mean, the league
it's a very little consequence, but
there you go.
We have run that experiment, Jason, in New York with Dolan, and we could have a whole segment about that. We have been pretty clear about how much we hate that situation.
I'm just saying, if I were LeBron, I can understand him being offended by somebody starting that conversation with as a father and then criticizing him as a father. Because I'm like, if I'm him, I'm thinking, I'm sorry, is your criticism that I have found a way to spend more time with my adult son who had a heart attack a few years ago? Like, I'd be like, get effed, man. Like, because my son's 11. He's, presumably leaving for college in 7 years. And I'm already dreading it and trying to figure out like, okay, I need to get another Xbox so that he and I can start playing Call of Duty together so that when he goes away to college, we have an activity we do together online. So he'll talk to me. Right. If at 19, he could come to my job with me, I'd take it in a second.
Yeah, but I do think that people
True Candor is going to be the co-host of this podcast with a couple.
If you were, which you were and are, a generational talent in politics, if you're like, True Candor is going to be Assistant Secretary of State of the state of Missouri, I think the voters of Missouri would be like, you know what? I don't know. That seems like a bit of a stretch for an
11-year-old.
They could criticize the choice and say, he's not up to the job and that I made a poor choice as like, whatever the executive role in this hypothetical scenario is. But what I don't think it would be fair to say is that I was doing a bad job as a father. And I'm saying that's why, if that's what got LeBron animated, I get that.
Yeah.
Well, fair. What a segment. I did not expect this one to be what it was, but Jason, is it to take us through to our deep dive for today?
Okay. All right. All right. Let's take a look at the politics of free agency, which started yesterday and this is in the NFL and has already been full of headlines. But what are the dynamics at play between the players and the front office? We're joined now by Gavin Reynolds, who previously worked in the finance office of the NFL, where he supported labor negotiations. He's also the host of Low Lights, which is a podcast here on the Valor Media Network. So, Gavin, how you doing?
Nope, you're on mute.
There we go. You're muted. And here he comes. Can we hit there? Here he is. Okay, good. An auspicious beginning to your podcast career. All right. Well, first of all, tell us, more about, life at the NFL and like what you did there, that kind of thing.
Yeah. First, guys, thank you for giving me an occasion to pull this guy out. I'm in New Haven, Connecticut right now. So I take advantage of every opportunity. I know.
So,
you know where I'm at right now.
I'm a sports bigamist today, but I'm a Falcons fan. And this is just a hoodie. This is just a hoodie. This is just a hoodie I like. Go Falcons.
I'll forgive you. Life at the NFL. I mean, look, when I joined the league, this was 2019. I had no idea what I was signing myself up for. I figured I would, see the good and the bad. I definitely saw the good, the bad, and the ugly. Learned a lot about a whole lot of stuff that I don't think most fans recognize goes on, in professional sports. And I had the opportunity to work not only with the finance team, like you mentioned, Jason, but also with the league's public policy team in DC. So we were looking at a whole range of policy issues, political issues that the NFL has equities in. I mean, I never guessed that tax policy would be something that the league would care about, but, owners in many cases, view their teams as their assets, as their investment. You guys were kind of talking about this a second ago. And so it makes sense when you think about it. But I mean, I had a blast. I got paid to go to games. I got paid to watch games. And, I can't really complain about that. But, Jason, you mentioned, most of the work I did was with the finance team. And so what I was doing day in, day out was a lot of sort of financial analysis and financial modeling as it relates to the collective bargaining agreement or the CBA. And Article 12 of that in particular dictates how the salary cap is calculated. And so a lot of what we were doing every single day was analyzing revenue across the league, across all 32 clubs and at the league office level, to crunch all the numbers and eventually figure out how much teams could spend on their player contracts. So it was a great time. I really enjoyed it. I miss it a lot. Still in touch with a lot of my friends from there. But I was looking at where the salary cap is when I was with the league, and I think we set it in the 2020 league year. It was like 198.2 or something, and I believe it's like 260 something right now, which is just insane. And I think a testament to how lucrative the NFL is. I think they've been very smart in recognizing new streams of revenue, whether it's sports betting or international expansion, streaming, really revolutionizing how we consume content and how the NFL can monetize their content. So yeah, that's that's sort of in a 2-minute version.
20% of it is like sales of Travis Kelce's jersey, I think.
Oh yeah.
Sure. All right, Adisu, go ahead, man. You got a question.
Shout out 50s.
Here we go. Yeah, that's not wrong. Not wrong. Well, we were talking earlier about the UFL's labor issues, and obviously with free agency starting last week, I'm curious, or earlier this week, I'm curious, especially with the salary cap and how it basically isn't a salary cap because the revenue and it keeps going up so much. How much power do players actually have in this league, in the NFL, to dictate where they want to go or leverage their power versus, in the NBA or in particular, where basically players get to, we've seen in the last few years, choose their situation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there are a couple ways to answer the question. There are a couple ways to kind of look at this. First is on a very practical level. There are different kinds of free agents who are in free agency right now. And the different kinds of free agents have different amounts of leverage. Very simply, you've got like your unrestricted free agents. These are players who've been in the league for at least 4 years. Their contracts are expiring, and they can negotiate and sign with any team. Going down below that, you've got your restricted free agents, right? These are players who have been on for 3 seasons. Their current team has right of first refusal to offer them a contract, and if they don't, then they can look to sign with another team. So I think that doesn't even include the franchise tag. I think that's a way in which players really lose out on a lot of power and lose out on a lot of leverage, because it's their current team stamping them and saying you really can't go anywhere else, nor can you really negotiate for your salary here, because your franchise tag salary is predetermined by the CBA and sort of set by the top players at your given position. So like you can look at it very practically in that, depending on how long you've been in the league, how many accrued seasons you have under your belt, that really dictates how much leverage, how much power you have. But I think you can look at it also at a more structural level. And I recommend everyone check out this piece by DeMaurice Smith, who used to be the head of the NFLPA. He wrote a piece, I think it was like for the NFLPA blog. I'm sure most people know that's the Players Association or the union. And his piece was called NFL Free Agency is a Study in Power and Control. It's very interesting. He sort of traces the power dynamics between players and management through the lens of free agency. And he looks most at guaranteed money. And it draws attention to the fact that it was actually a free agent contract in the NBA, which was Larry Bird's second contract with the Celtics in the 80s, that set the precedent for guaranteed money. Deshaun Watson, recently had his big record-breaking, fully guaranteed $230 million contract with the Browns a few years back. And as of a couple of days ago, that was eclipsed by Josh Allen. His like $250 million guaranteed. And owners have been very upset about this. And I think owners, when you talk about sort of the power struggles between management ownership on one side and players on the other, and I found myself sitting on the side of the table of ownership and management when I was involved in the CBA negotiations and all of that, which is super fascinating. But I think owners have been very scared of the precedent that these fully guaranteed contracts can set. I mean, when Lamar Jackson was working on his contract, the owners were sort of coming out right and saying Lamar Jackson's contract will not be fully guaranteed. And eventually, I think the PA filed a grievance saying that the owners were colluding to keep contract.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Watching that was really fascinating because maybe I have the facts wrong, but he represented himself. Is that right? Which in a sense, like depending on where you are can make some sense, right? Because you cut out the 15%, which is millions and millions of dollars. The problem he had though was that the timing of it all, because he was basically iced out for the period of time, he lost out on some money. But what I thought was really weird was that Lamar Jackson was obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, yet he couldn't get offers from other teams, which makes it seem, and maybe this puts you in a difficult spot given you've worked with the owners, but it felt like there was a lot of reasons to think collusion was happening. Like, why wouldn't all these teams with crappy quarterbacks make offers for this generational talent in Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, look, like I'm a student of antitrust law. I'm in law school right now. That's why I'm in New Haven, Connecticut. But there has been a lot of allegations of collusion.
Yeah, does anybody come on any of my podcasts who didn't go to Yale Law School? Like,
no, he went to Quinnipiac. That's what I was assuming. He's in New Haven.
No, he's a Yale, right?
New Haven.
We're a little closer to Pepe's Pizza, so
I've been to that place. Good lord,
right.
It's pretty good, actually, not bad.
Yeah,
okay, anyway, go ahead.
Good. Yeah. No, I was gonna say, I mean, there are a lot of ways in which the NFL and not just the NFL, but like even looking beyond the Lamar Jackson story, I mean, other leagues are said to collude. I mean, the leagues have like statutory exemptions for things like pooling their broadcast rights. For example, you think about things like the salary cap, for example. I mean, that's literally price fixing. That's like naked price fixing, but the league gets around that because they collectively bargain, with the Players Association. You can look at sort of a less formalized mechanism, which is the fact that the league meets, I think it's something like quarterly. The owners come together, and if you're the government proving a Section 1 or Section 2 violation of the Sherman Act, you're going to look for evidence of competitors coming together, through meetings
and
they
certain
things.
Literally have them, it's like
Right.
They walk up together arm in arm. Yeah.
Exactly. But the unique thing about professional sports, and this is what courts, and I don't mean to go on like a whole legal tangent here.
No, go ahead. This show is for this kind of nerdiness.
Okay, cool. Thank you. This is what courts grapple with all the time, because the question is, are these owners, are these teams competitors, or are they collaborators, or are they both? Because you could argue that without owners coming together and agreeing on certain things as it pertains to gameplay, as it pertains to, salaries, as it pertains to other policies, you couldn't have on-field competition at all. Like, you couldn't have games put on in the first place. And so to the extent that justifies some of the anti-competitive behavior off the field, I think the NFL has been able to benefit from the fact that, that cooperation, that lack of competition off the field is necessary to put on the competition on the field. And so I think it's very interesting. And this is something that, the Players Association has been very vocal about, whether it's Lamar Jackson or other examples, which is that, they feel that these meetings that the league, has, and I went to one, are specific, formalized ways in which ownership can come together and exert their influence and their power and their control to the disadvantage of players.
It's unfortunate that Deshaun Watson is the test case here, because it's like nobody's looking at that and being like, that worked out well. Maybe Josh Allen can maybe break the mold a little bit here, because
I think so.
Yeah.
I can understand why in any sport why you would want guaranteed money, right? Like, let's stipulate to that, but particularly in football, where every play is the specter of a career-ending injury is there on every play.
And the length, as we were talking about before, the length of your career in football.
Yes.
LeBron James is the outlier, but you can still, role players have 10, 12-year careers in the NBA, baseball, you name it. Yeah. What's the average, Kevin? I would guess 3 years.
Like 3, yeah.
Exactly. Not to mention,
years.
And in the NBA, if you wash out of the NBA, you can go to Europe and you can make a nice living. You can,
exactly.
We just talked earlier about how you're getting $55K to play in the UFL.
Yeah, right.
But it's not as I look at it though, it's a tricky argument, this guaranteed money piece, and arguing that that's the player friendly avenue, right? Because you think about it, there's still a salary cap. That seems to be the real question for players, because the cap being what it is, guaranteed money or not, let's say the status quo, very rare that you have guaranteed money. Every team is still hitting the cap every year pretty much. So what that means is the wealth is distributed more. If you start going to more guaranteed money, it's just going to equilibrate still up to the same cap. So if I were in the Players Association, and especially if I'm a player on the lower end of the Players Association, I'm I don't care about guaranteed money. I care about the cap because that's going to rise all boats.
Definitely.
Well, I just learned the word equilibrate, and I looked it up, and that is a real word, Ravi.
Hey.
Yale law school people continue to impress me. God, equilibrate.
I think you have a point, though, and which kind of reminds me of the fact that, really every player, a couple of things. I think one thing is like Tom Brady was, I do not like Tom Brady, but I'll hand it to him and say that
while wearing his Falcons cap.
Right.
That was the moment where I started to decide I might need to become a Niners fan. January of 2017. That's right. Go ahead.
I will hand it to him because I think he known to be a really good teammate, and I think he brought that out in how he approached his contracts. He always tried to take less guaranteed money to free up more cap space for other teammates. I think he truly did want to win. I mean, he won like more championships than anyone else, and I think a big reason is because he took some of those financial, I guess, cuts for himself, so that whether it was the Pats or the Bucks could actually build a championship team around him. And so I think that, it's a good point, but, as we go into free agency here, you're seeing teams get very creative, as they always do, with, rolling over guaranteed money into bonuses and, getting creative with ways that they can free up that cap space. And the other thing I was going to say, when we're talking about player power, because I've thought a lot about this. And one thing that I worked on when I was at the league as well was in helping launch their first ever voting initiative, NFL Votes. I think I'm posted for it back there somewhere. But this was back in 2020. And, so I thought a lot about sort of what it is about the NBA, where I think you've had a little bit more of a history of player activism and successful exertions of player power. And I do think that there are a few tangible differences, and I'm curious what you guys think. I'm not as big of an NBA person, but, the fact that you've got 5 players on the court in the NBA, each player sort of has a more outsized role. I feel like the fact that players don't wear helmets.
Right. Yeah, you can see their face the whole
Exactly.
time.
You see their face, you know who they are. Like, you could be a lesser known or an NBA player with less playing time, but a lot of people in your community will probably know who you are.
And if they see you on the street, they're going to know 100% that guy is 7 feet tall. He must play for the local NBA team.
I just saw some of them, actually. I'm down the street from what seems like the hotel for whoever's playing the Pelicans, and I saw some dude, must have been a bench player or something, but it was like, this guy has to be an NBA player.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that gives them leverage, right?
A friend of mine played for the Thunder for many, many years, and he lives here in Kansas City. And when we go places, like, nobody is like, I wonder who that guy is. He's 6'10",
right? There's no question.
I definitely think that has a lot to do with it. And also, outside of the quarterback, who obviously touches the ball on every play, there's 10 out of the 11 players on the field can be, or at least feel, totally irrelevant on one side of the ball to the play at any given time. And honestly, wide receivers can go. How many catches did Travis Kelce have in the Super Bowl, Jason? Sorry, too soon. But anyway, point is, like, Travis Kelce, huge star, Swift, whatever, can go an entire game and be invisible. You cannot be a basketball player, especially a star basketball player, and be invisible for an entire game. It's like you're naked in some ways and literally exposed with your head out. So it has a lot.
Like baseball, you can go for 5 and still be the star, and you can.
Yeah.
Okay, so other than obviously the money, we've talked a lot about the money here. I have to imagine there's a lot of situations where, a player knows what they're worth, and the offers they're going to get are going to be close. Maybe there's a $3-4 million difference, but then, the taxes in one state or another basically make it where it's functionally the same, that kind of thing. Yeah. So what are the other intangibles or maybe tangibles that, allow a team to recruit free agents? I mean, I would imagine one of them is the possibility of winning, how much they're going to get to play. I mean, what else is going on there?
Yeah, I definitely think the biggest two are probably money and also where do you think you have the best chance to succeed. And I think most players measure success by winning a championship. The personal accolades, the Pro Bowl, like all that's great. But when you think about from a team standpoint, it's winning a Super Bowl. I think that's huge. And then I think below that, but I think these flow up to it. You want to be somewhere where, management, coaching staff, ownership are all known to be invested in the team. And I do think that a good case study in this would be the Washington Commanders. Up until this past season, I don't know how many people would have said that like the Commanders would have been a desirable landing spot, for a free agent or, for a rookie for that matter. The team was not winning games. And there's a widespread reporting about a toxic culture that the team had from the top down, and at least it seems that way. But then we saw the difference at a change in ownership and a change in, I don't know the extent to which management changed, but I think there was some change at the management level as well. We've seen what change that can make, right? Like not only has the team started to sort of seem to have cohesion and, guys like actually wanting to play with each other, but they're winning games. They went from something like 4-13 to 12-5, I think was their turnaround from year to year. And, just last week, right, Deebo Samuel now coming over to the Commanders. I think that's a pretty good case study in the fact that, when a team, beyond the money they're offering you, beyond what you perceive to be the chance of winning a Super Bowl, if a team is known to have a really good culture where from the top down there's investment in how the team plays, winning a Super Bowl being a part of that, I do think that, that can make all the difference. And they're all intertwined. Like, I don't think any one of these exists in a vacuum. Like, a team is going to do better and win more and have a better chance of winning the Super Bowl if their management and ownership are known to have that investment in the team and sort of cultivate a culture where players actually want to play. So I think they're all intertwined. But from my vantage point, having never worked for a specific club, I think those are some of the factors that if I'm a player, I'd be looking at.
Well, this is awesome. It's been really interesting to talk to you. Thank you, Gavin. Tell people where they can find you and talk about the new show.
Yeah, so I'm on all social media at Gavin Reynolds, and we've also got at Lowlights Pod on X to connect. So throw us a follow. We're also on Instagram. So hopefully we'll be going live with our first episode in the next couple of weeks. Hope to see you guys there and hope to be back here at some point too.
It was awesome.
Well, thanks for joining, man.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening. I'm gonna skip. Ravi's got a roll anyway, so I'm gonna skip our usual friendly banter at the end and let people get on with their day. Thanks everybody for listening. Remember, sports actually do matter quite a lot. Thanks.